From Communities at Work, and we're here at the Power to the People conference, which is all about building citizen-driven communities. And I'm here with Nick Maisey, who in 2010 founded Befriend while still at university. So Nick, we'll circle back around to that. You've got a presentation about how community development starts inside the organisation. What does that mean?
Well, to me, organisations or workplaces are communities just like any other. I think a lot of the time when we talk about community development, we're talking about local, place-based localities or neighbourhoods, but the structures that we work within are communities too. And I believe that if those structures and the cultures within them aren't really aligned with the principles of asset-based community development, when we're trying to practice some of those principles in the localities in which we're based in, it can really undermine the way that we're working and potentially limit us from really achieving the ultimate objectives that we're aiming to.
So why do traditional organisations present problems then?
I guess in my experience, a lot of traditional organisations can be structured in hierarchical ways that are where it's a command and control style environment. The power for making decisions is held with a greater amount of power to some people than others. The way in which we relate to each other in workplace contexts can be very different, and at times even tense. I think a lot of the time people are expected to be a very different version of themselves at work than they can be in the rest of their life. And the opportunities for people to develop their capacity to exercise citizenship in terms of the decisions that they make, the way that they contribute to others, the way that they relate to others, is undermined by those structures.
And what does an organisation that's designed as a community look like?
Great question. I think that should be determined by the community, and so it could look very different from one context to the next. A lot of the way that we've approached our work designing the structures of Befriend has been a collaborative effort where we've used design thinking to really work through a process together of considering what is our purpose, what's the deep intention that we're brought together to work towards, what are the values that underpin that, and how can we not only develop programs, activities or services, but how can we actually design structures and a culture that's grounded in those values and that's fit for purpose. So for us, that looks like a network of decentralized teams, distributed authority, really strong relationships between people, a place where people can bring their whole self to work, and a place that's really committed to really nurturing the development of each individual person to fulfill their potential, not as an employee, but as a human.
So you mentioned design thinking there. Can you explain what you mean by that?
To me, quite simply, a design process is one whereby we start with really empathizing, with connecting with whatever the human need is, particularly an unmet human need. We try to understand that really deeply and how someone is experiencing a particular situation or event. From that point, we then might really seek inspiration from all sorts of different possibilities. So we might look at examples from around the world of all sorts of different creative ways that people are responding to meet that human need. After that, we'd kind of go into what we might call the ideation phase, which is really just a phase of doing lots of creative brainstorming, where we bring together that need, the different types of possibilities that could exist, and we think about what are our ideas for how we might go about meeting that need. And then we'd move into the next phase, which we might call prototyping, which is really just creating a workable way of putting our idea into practice really quickly, cheaply, and easily to see if it works. So we test that with people, we get feedback, and we refine it. And that's just I think it's a really grounded way to develop solutions to human problems based on the needs of those individuals.
So the design thinking process is obviously one way to solve a problem. Why is it the way that you choose in this instance, and how is it better than other ways?
I think that what design thinking can offer us is firstly that deep empathy with the experience of the people who are having that problem. Quite a lot of the time, we make all sorts of different assumptions about that group of people. So for example, if I wanted to develop a solution to meet the needs of people experiencing homelessness, if I'm not experiencing homelessness, I'm making all kinds of assumptions about what it means to experience homelessness. So before I go any further at all into coming up with solutions, I really need to develop a deep empathy for that lived experience. I think that the second thing that design thinking can offer us is that it can really push us to really expand our thinking around what's possible. It can really help to incite our creativity by exposing us to a whole range of different types of examples that challenge what we already know. We don't know what we don't know, so it helps us to really kind of push our minds further afield. And the value of the making a workable model that we can really test and play with means that we can get feedback on our ideas rather than spending ages planning and developing something, and 3 years later then we launch it to get feedback. Well, if there were flaws in the design, we could have learnt that much earlier if we developed a workable model and tested it with people.
So tell us more about Befriend. What does Befriend do to help set these organisations up?
Well, interestingly, this is some work that we've really only been discovering for about the last 2 years. So we have been working as a community development organisation in a place-based way, working with groups of local residents, organisations and businesses to develop localised place-based inclusive social networks. So really that means engaging with residents to start conversations about the things that they love doing and what it would look like for them to extend the invitation to people who live in their neighbourhood to share those experiences with them, and to support them to connect those experiences as a broader social network within that locality. We also have consultants that work with organisations to support the development of their strategies and capabilities in nurturing connection in people's lives. And it's really only around about 2 years ago that we started thinking, wait a minute, the ways that we're structured aren't actually necessarily fit for purpose and are some ways undermining our efforts to do that work in community. So how do we now apply a lot of that same sort of stuff that we've been doing with other people internally with ourselves too?
Okay, so that leads on to a question then. If you only came to it late, what would be one bit of advice that you could give as a starting point for an organisation that wanted to change the way that they were structured so that they could better deliver on what their goals are in the community?
I mean, I think first of all, it has to start with a really strong foundation of relationships, a workplace of psychological safety where people feel they can genuinely express their fears, their expectations, their hopes, their reality without fear of reprisal. With that foundation in place, I think that the best starting point is to talk about where there is a point of tension between the things that we value and the ways that we're working, and to have some really difficult and courageous conversations about that disconnect and consider how could we bring our ways of working back in alignment with our values.
Great, thank you very much for that, Nick. If you'd like to see more videos from the Power to the People conference, please check out our YouTube channel.